Okay, continuing the family connection on the Vic State Cricket Podcast this week is, well, we've got the Elliots. We've got Matthew Elliott and also Sam Elliott. So we're going to introduce the most important one first. Sam, current Victorian squad member. I think we've got to go to you first. Welcome.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
What the hell?
And officially, Matthew, welcome.
Thank you. No, thank you. I think I should have been first then. That was 100 games, surely.
Well, I think we go with the more recent Victorian play, don't we?
All right. Maybe just.
What's it like watching your son on the hill play for the Navy in white?
It's very nerve-wracking. I think the guys were having a crack at me last night about standing there and just riding every ball and watching him play. But no, it was really good. I really enjoyed watching the game full stop on Sunday. The standard was obviously extremely high. WA had a really good team. So, no, I just enjoyed the experience watching the game.
You said you were nervous. Are you more nervous watching your son play or batting at 3 for Australia with Alan Donald steaming in and you're next to come?
No, watching your kids play is the worst because you can't do anything about it. You're sort of out of control a bit. But, no, it's been really good to watch him come through, especially from a young guy and finally sort of start to make his way. But no less nerve-wracking to watch him play. No, definitely worse watching them playing.
And then to you, Sam, what's it like having your dad there watching on the hill, watching you really closely? Do you think about it much?
Nah, I definitely don't think about it. I think that having around so many games, like you said, Dad, from being when I was playing when I was younger to even on the weekend, I think just get used to it. It's just, for me, he's not really a cricketer, he's just a dad. So, it's pretty stock standard, really.
Now, the question I'm dying to ask you is, you're a bowler and not a batsman. Your dad opened the batting for Australia and you're a fast bowler who opens the bowling for Victoria. How does this happen?
I think it started because I've got an older brother that's a couple of years ahead of me. He's sort of first one to grab all of Dad's gear, backyard cricket. He was always the one that jumped in, wanted to bat first, so I was left with the ball. And because he was a couple of years older, there was a couple of long days in the backyard trying to get him out. So I think that's how that sort of happened, and then sort of built on with my younger brother coming through. So, and Zach's never one to sort of share the bat around either, so he's never out. So there's a couple of long days for me and Will in the backyard.
Do you have any memories at all of your dad playing cricket for his country, for his state? Any memories at all, or is it all on YouTube that you sort of take it in? No,
there's probably one that his playing days back end of when he was playing for South Australia is the only stuff that I can remember. There's one vivid memory of him and Buff batting together that's probably the one that sticks out the most. Or even in his last game, actually, when Jeezy got him out. I remember he's maybe a little bit of a lean trot. I think he got 13 or something, and this kid was sitting behind me who was like a mate of a mate. I was only young at the time. And he sort of said, "Oh, your dad's no good," with a few extra words than that. I turned around and hit him in the face. So, yeah, that's probably my last him play, which isn't great. But, yeah, I think the one that definitely sticks out the most is him batting with Buff. And when we were living over in South Australia, it was pretty cool now to look back on. We got Buff, who's obviously coached Australia, and we used to go over to his house all the time and used to harass Jake, his son, and now Dizzy coaching as well. We lived in Dizzy's house for a couple of years or a year and a bit. So, yeah, it's pretty cool now even playing against them.
Yeah.
Swings and roundabouts.
We want to get to your dad's career, but just while we're talking about yourself, growing up in that family of your dad playing for Australia, but also you're mentioning names like Darren Lehman and Jason Gillespie, the expectation on you to sort of follow in your dad's footsteps, like your brothers as well, you know, that same sort of pressure. But now you've reached that level. You're sitting there, I'm talking to you with the Victorian cap on. I'm really interested in that pathway through for you.
I think it was a bit easier for me than perhaps my older brother. I think, you know, those two being left-handed top-order batters, he probably copped a bit more of a brunt of it than me, especially the first one to come through. And yeah, like you said, I like to think of myself as an all-rounder, but mainly a bowler at the moment. So I think it was a bit easier on me coming through, not being sort of compared to him as much. And it gets to a stage really where, especially out in the field, you've sort of heard it all before, so it doesn't really come into it too much. But yeah, coming up through, it is what it is. You can't change it, but he's my biggest supporter. So yeah.
What about as a dad? Did you try and shield them away from it, or did you try and embrace it, or put pressure? Not put pressure on them, but come on, you've got the talent. It's in the family. What was it like, as the kids grew up?
I always encouraged them to be involved in sport. Didn't have to be cricket for me. Just wanted them to be involved in some sort of sport. I think it's a great mechanism for development of people. So I always wanted them to be active and to be involved. And then I think Sam's right, because Zach was the older one, he's left-handed. He probably bore it a bit more, and that used to really hurt me a bit. I used to get fairly wound up about people having a bit of a crack at him. But again, you can't do anything about it. It's no good going up and having a crack at somebody or accosting them after the game. And I think for the boys, the quicker they develop the tools and the strategies to be able to cope with it, probably the better for them. But I know Zach, I think it probably affected him, probably more than Sam, being a different type of player. And then, because he was following him behind, I think he just sort of missed that wave of bow wave of sort of pressure. But look, they've got to find their own way, the boys, and they do that, and they love the game, and that's the big thing for me. Whether it's at this level or whether it's at club level or whether it's at community level, it's just the love and passion for the game that we share together.
So where did that passion come for you? A boy from Kyabram, in country Victoria, that ends up playing cricket for his country. I mean, it's such a great story. But how did the bug of cricket get you?
It wasn't even Kyabram. We lived in a place so much smaller than Kai called Lancaster. It's literally a corner store, but you have to say Kyabram, and then no one knows, and then you say Shepparton, and you sort of work your way down to Lancaster. But my father played as well, so I have really vivid memories of going along to games, hot, country, dry. But we just went just to follow Dad around, and then you'd find a bat and a ball, and you just have a hit, and you'd be playing, and you make your own games up, and then I'd annoy him for a drink or some food, and that's how I developed my passion for the game. And I was really, really lucky when I reckon there is a lot of luck in it. When I was coming through, I played some really great clubs. Kyabram Cricket Club was great to me. They always gave me plenty of opportunities, and they helped foster my love of the game. So my heroes in cricket were the guys I started playing with at Kyabram. Russell Morgan, Peter Raglas. I could still name the guys that were my heroes playing. I remember being at mid-off, packing my ducks, throwing the ball to, Peter Raglas or Bob Ferguson, who are legends in my mind, and the guys that I played with. And then I went to Collingwood as well, which was a great club. So I was really lucky and fortunate that my love of the game was fostered through some really great clubs.
So when I asked Dave Hussey this question, I'll ask you as well. What does Victorian cricket mean to you?
I think for me, it's more of the memory. Like as you get older, I suppose not what it means to me, but I just reflect so fondly on coming down and just playing Premier Cricket was such a big thing from a kid from the country. The opportunity to play at some of the old VFL grounds, that was a really exciting experience. So I have really great memories of playing Premier Cricket because it was big for me. And then you play against your idols. I played against Rodney Hogg in my second game, and I watched him on TV. So for me, I was living my childhood dream just playing Premier Cricket. So for me, Victorian cricket's not just the state stuff; it's Premier Cricket as well because I absolutely loved it. And then to watch the team and with a bit more of a vested interest now too. And watch it and see the changes, particularly probably in more recent times. Really excited about potentially where it can go as well. I want to see them win and be successful and be a strong team as well, which they have done certainly in the 4-day competition, and finding their way in the 1-day stuff.
And Sam, do you hear what your dad's saying? Now you're doing that. Is it similar for you watching, say, the Big Bash on television or going down and watching cricket here at the City Power Centre? Now you're that person playing with and against your heroes?
Yeah, it was pretty, I guess, strange to start because especially being around the first couple of Big Bashes and in terms of we'd be able to go down into the rooms and meet those people and, Huss would give me a pair of gloves and it'd be the best thing ever. And even now, playing with guys that I watch on TV, like Petey Hanscom growing up and Barrel and stuff like that, and being able to play with alongside them. Like Pato was one of my favourite bowlers. And now to say that I've played a game with him, it's unbelievable. But I think not only it starts like that, but it's even better when you become friends with them, become mates with them, being able to text them about anything or what do you see on TV or the tips for the races or whatever it is. It seems to be that always coming through. And I think cricket's such a great sport because you're with people for a long time. You get to really form bonds and make friendships with those people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sam, I was talking to Sam about not so much living in your shadow, but the expectation of the Elliott name. You were a little bit different because as you were coming through playing for Victoria, you were going to be the next Bill Laurie. What was that like, having that comparison? Because it's a pretty daunting comparison to have.
The worst part of it was they did this photo thing once where they had Paul Rifle, myself and Bill Laurie because of the noses, and Bill's was still like, I've got a big one, but Bill's nose was like twice as big as mine. It was phenomenally big. But when I started, Bill was, working for Cricket Victoria. So I remember going into his office and him saying to me, mate, you need to play baseball, you need to work on your throwing, you need to, do all these things with your fielding. So I had a sort of a real direct connection with Bill, even coming through the system. Look, I didn't see Bill play as much, especially growing up where I grew up. So I didn't feel any real expectation other than, he was a wonderful player. And so any comparison shows that you're sort of on the right track. I remember him saying to me once, because we played a game at the MCG and I got a few runs and I sort of hit a guy late in the day, whacked a guy over the top. Bill was like, nah, just grind him out. Don't give him a chance. I don't. So that was one of the few times he sort of had any comments about, a particular innings or the way that I played. But no, he's a legend of Victorian cricket and Australian cricket.
Where did your pull shot come from? Is it something that you were talking about playing cricket in Kyabram, or is it a shot your dad had that you sort of mimic? Where did that come from? Because it's still with you now as the famous shot, the famous shot that you hit Alan Donald through a sponsorship hoarding at Square Leg at the Wanderers. But forever through your career, that was what you were known for.
Yeah, I think it mainly because we played on synthetic wickets up in Kyabram, and they really bounced a bit. So I wasn't strong enough to hit the ball down the ground. So you sort of had to the only way I could score really was to take it on a bit. Whether it's that or, I don't know, like maybe it was the synthetic wickets a bit. I never actively tried to practice playing it lots and lots, but I don't know, it's just one of those things, I think.
Third highest amount of runs ever scored for Victorian Sheffield Shield cricket. It's an extraordinary achievement, an extraordinary number when you talk about some of the other names up there with Brad Hodge and Dean Jones. The art of batting a long time, the art of scoring centuries, 50 first-class centuries, is there an art to it?
I think there's a way to manage yourself at the crease, definitely. I think the ability to just stay in the moment for long periods of time is something is a skill you can learn, whether it's like mentally distracting yourself between balls or a little routine ball to ball or whatever it is, or staying sort of in a little bit of a bubble where you're not letting outside things really affect you too much. I think that's a skill that can be learned, but you have to commit to it, I think. And I really feel for the modern player because the modern player faces so many challenges, so many different formats. Mm. So in a lot of ways, they're actually more skillful than particularly in my era because it was just 4-day cricket and 1-day cricket, and that and the way the schedule worked is you had the ability to really manage yourself. But yeah, I think it can be a learnt skill for sure.
So in 2003, 2004, you broke the record for the most runs ever in a Sheffield Shield season. Michael Bevan then broke it the next year.
Nothing like holding it for a while, is it?
Exactly. But it was a Shield winning season. It was the season after the tragic passing of David Hawkes. Was that when you were at your absolute best, do you think, as a cricketer? Because you had obviously the injuries, which we'll get to shortly, but was that you at the absolute peak of your powers?
I think statistically, yes, but I think I played better when I was a bit younger. I just probably learnt to manage myself a bit better. And sometimes it's the way the year unfolds. You can get on a run where the way the games unfold And we were bowling really, really. We had a fantastic bowling group that was really unheralded. John Moss, Matty Innes was a wonderful bowler. Alan Wise did a great job. And then we had Mick Lewis and Shane Harwood. So we had a terrific attack that was knocking teams over and giving us a chance to bat, particularly at the MCG, for long periods in the middle of games to make big scores. So sometimes it could be the way the season works out. And if your bowling attack's bowling well, you're getting plenty of opportunities to bat for long periods of time. So in that instance that year, I was afforded lots of opportunities by the bowlers.
So you're making a lot of runs, and it's a hard team to get in the Australian one because some of the best openers of the last 50 years are in and around the team. You've got Taylor, you've got Slater, there was Blewett, there was Hayden, there was Elliott, there was Langer. How hard is it when you just keep making runs and you can't get in, or when you're in, worrying about all the blokes that are getting runs back at Sheffield Shield level? That pressure.
Yeah, it can be difficult. I really relay a story about. I really felt for Hodgie this day. We're playing a one day at the MCG, and David Boone was there as a selector, and he came in to tell us both in that specific year that we weren't going. Either of us were going to Sri Lanka. They'd picked the squad, and neither of us were in it. And I could sort of see the writing on the wall a bit. And we sort of had a game to play, so I said, "Oh, no worries. Thanks, Booney. Thanks for at least letting us know all the feedback." And then I could see Hodgie still wanted to, talk about it. And so I left the two of them to have a chat and just went away to prepare to play. But when you're in that position, it's all the other stuff that can affect how you're going. And it sounds really cliche, but you've got to try and as much as you can stay in a position where you're consistent. But it's so difficult because all these sorts of things and white noise mentally can affect, and it can move you away from the things that you've been doing. You become more frustrated easily, or there's something else that distracts you, and then all of a sudden you start to not play as well. I just felt like, and this is just this personally, I felt like we had, potentially Hodgie and myself, had to do more than the players that were getting picked to play to get picked. But having said that, I had plenty of opportunities. I probably felt more for Hodgie, where I thought he was a bit hard done by. I thought he could have been afforded a few more opportunities given how good a player he was.
So in that situation, that pressure, do doubts come in, or are there more sort of distractions that you've kind of got to do different things, or you've got to behave differently, or you've got to, I don't know, just to be able to prove yourself almost? Is there one emotional over the other that makes it hard to sort of go away from just playing?
It's a great question, and I felt that was happening where after that year I come out and probably didn't play as well, but I was probably trying to be more aggressive because I thought I had to play a certain way to get picked, and then you move away from what is your real strength and your return diminishes, and then you get caught in this cycle of like trying to be something that you're not as well. So I don't know, it's a really difficult one. I think if you can, as much as you can keep it to the side and really try and stay true to yourself and stay focused on just making sure that you're doing the things day to day and week to week that you give yourself the best chance to succeed. If you can stay in that space for as long as you can, I think you give yourself a chance. But it's so difficult. It's almost really hard to articulate, and sometimes it's the frustration that actually ends up affecting your performance because you start to get a bit resentful about why you're not getting picked. Or why the opportunities aren't presenting themselves. And as a side to that, I did catch up with Bernie later on, that year, and I said to him, "Mate, I can't compete with some of the players you're picking because in your mind, I felt like the potential of what they could be was what they were getting picked on." And I said, I'm not that good in the field. This is what I do. If that's not enough, I'll never get picked. I can't compete with potentially what someone might do.
Yeah.
But then, you have these conversations, but it ends up feeling like it's, sour grapes as to why you're not getting picked. Selection is such a difficult thing sometimes to deal with.
Yeah. So many people reference the mid-wicket incident with Mark Waugh, the clash and the knee injury that came of that when you were batting so beautifully that day in Sydney against the West Indies. You did get back and play, obviously, for Australia and were wonderful in that 97 Ashes series. Do you look back now on that incident? Do you think that had a big impact on your career, the clash with Mark Waugh, or is that overstated a little bit?
I had plenty of chances. It's just like physically, like knee never really got back to being 100%, and then started to have just little problems year on year with it, and then and it sounds like an excuse though when you say it, but it was more. It's more when you're in that moment and that time, it's maximising the opportunity that you get. It probably wasn't so much the injury, but I had the opportunity then. Like you could tell, we had the wind, like had them done. The wicket was flat. Ambrose and Walsh they were just plugging away. They weren't, they had the ability. I keep saying to Sam, if you could watch anyone bowl, Kirtley's ability to sense a moment in a game and take his performance to really get himself to the next level was probably the best of both. He and Walsh was the best I've seen. Just sensing moments in games, but they were in autopilot mode at that stage. So to get 100 and establish yourself in the team, and then you go into the next game, you can build that momentum and it can start to roll on. But it didn't happen. So, and then I, as I said, I got plenty of opportunities to come back into the team. I just couldn't really, embed myself in the team with enough performances.
Is there anything you'd change? Is there anything you regret now looking back and thought, if I'd done that differently, it might have been a different set of circumstances? 21 test matches, 3 centuries, not the average, say, at Shield level, but that is often the case when someone goes up and plays for their country. When you look back, what do you think?
Probably more, it's probably not nothing about playing. It was more preparation. So at that stage, I reckon you could sense the game was changing a bit. And so I'd sort of go out and run and do long runs and whatever, but I couldn't get any slower. I needed to be a bit quicker and more athletic and be a bit stronger in the field and move a bit better. So the only thing I'd probably regret now is not pursuing some of those things a bit more and developing that side of myself as an athlete, because I was really focused on the skill aspect of the game and the technique and the craft. But I think you still need, but there was plenty of opportunities you could see at that time to develop yourself in that space as well.
Sam, listening to your dad talk about playing for his country and all that sort of thing, how much do you get out of that and how much does that help you? And how often do you sit around the kitchen table and talk to your dad and say, look, I've got this issue I'm trying to work through, or how much of that do you use him as a resource?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff he's talking about, mainly about the mental side of the game, typically use him on, I think he's selling himself short a little bit in terms of the way he thinks about the game, and his knee still bugs him now. So I think those sort of things, that he's very, very modest, and the way he talks to people and the way that people talk about him is probably the biggest reflection on him. I think even yesterday we were at a past players golf day, and the amount of people that came up and said, where was Dad, and all that sort of stuff, and he was off working. But all those sorts of things, I think, is more of a credit to him than necessarily his playing ability, but more, I think, how people saw him as a teammate, especially Matthew Mott.
Yeah.
Spoke recently in an interview. It's probably something I haven't sort of read or seen outside of Dad that other people, thought. I've always sort of seen in the media, he's always portrayed as someone who was grumpy and this, and he definitely can be that, but he's definitely not that around the house and with me and my brothers and with his mates and all that sort of stuff. So I think he's obviously very, very serious in his work and all that sort of thing, but I think more the way that people speak about him sits with me probably more fondly than he's necessarily playing.
What was more scary, facing Alan Donald at the top of his run or someone like a Shane Harwood in the nets for Victoria?
Stickers could bowl fast, yeah. He was, and we had a couple of sessions where I think Huss might have stirred him up one day, and I was batting after Huss, so I said I didn't really appreciate it. I remember actually playing Alan Donald in South Africa. It's probably one of my fondest cricket memories. We're playing him in the second test at Port Elizabeth, and Warnie had spun it, bowled unbelievable, and Joburg, and we'd pantsed them. And so they went the green wicket, the other went a juicy wicket, and facing him in that test match was one of my greatest cricket memories because it was on, he was bowling fast, he was hitting the bat hard, and you were right in the contest. And every time I remember looking down, watching him at fine leg and thinking, I hope he doesn't take his hat off. He takes his hat off because, another one. And he just had me pinned down one end for about half an hour. But they're the things that I reflect really fondly on. That's what you want to experience as a player, be in that moment and be really tested. And I always say, I've spoken to the Shippy got me in a few years ago, and I always say this is the white ball stuff gives us the luxury, affords us to be able to play red ball cricket, pays the bills to be able to play red ball cricket, because that's the real test of a player. That's where you really challenge yourself as a player, and you find out a lot about yourself in situations in 4-day stuff. But white ball cricket, yes, but it's more scoreboard pressure and being able to manage moment to moment. But in 4-day cricket, I think that's the real, and 5-day cricket, you just really find out a lot about yourself.
A couple more questions before we've sort of run out of time, but I want to ask you a couple more about getting still involved now in cricket as president of Fitzroy Doncaster, getting back to grassroots cricket now at now with the same club that your son plays at. What's that like? And also, what's Premier Cricket like? Are you seeing opening batsmen with the same batting craft of yourself, or a Brad Hodge or a Dean Jones or a Cameron White coming through?
I'm definitely not one of those people that sits back and says it was better in my day, and that's a real bugbear of mine. I really despise people talking down Premier Cricket, because I go and watch it, and it's a really good standard of cricket. I think there's been a bit of a step change in the last couple of years too, where the state boys and the contract boys are playing more, which I think is a great thing for the competition. You learn by watching, and by watching the best players play. Like Marcus Harris played against Fitzroy last year and got 100 on a tricky wicket. And he just showed our boys, how to play. And I hope that they took a lot from the experience of playing against a player of that quality. So I definitely think it's exciting as to where the competition's going. I can see some really good players coming through. I think we're building a little bit of a generation of a younger group. If we can stay patient and watch that group come through, hopefully we can build a bit of a dynasty in Victorian cricket, similar to watching the WA team on the weekend. They've got a very experienced group of players. So yeah, it's been great to get back and be involved. The game's been great to me, so it's about time I stepped up and gave a bit back.
And the last question is Sam as clever as you? Because the mail is that you did very well back at school.
He's much smarter than me. He's street smart.
Probably,
street smart. Yeah, I'm book smart. He's street smart.
What was your score back at school in year 12? It's better than your batting average.
I think it was. This is HSC, or actually it might have been the first year of VCE. Yeah, I think I got 346 out of 410 maybe. I think you needed 350 something to get to medicine that year at Melbourne Uni. So
there you go.
Yeah, so but I enjoyed school. I was a bit of a nuffy. I was just a bit of a nerdy book, but loved it. So, and I was really lucky at school at Kyabram High where my dad taught. We had some great teachers, and it was a great school. Well,
it's so much fun to have you both in here. I could talk to you for 4 hours because growing up, having watching you on the television, it was so much fun to watch you. So to be able to spend some time with you, talking about your career, fantastic. Thank you for coming in.
Appreciate it.
And for you, Sam, good luck. You're at the start of your journey, and hopefully it's a long one, just like your dad representing Victoria.
Thank you.
That is it for the Vic State Cricket Podcast for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the family affair. We'll catch you again next week.